He didn't knock, didn't stammer, didn't ask for $1. He just stepped into that dusty pawn shop like he'd been carrying silence longer than most folks carry memories. With a slow breath, he set a carved wooden box on the counter. No words, just history wrapped in patience. The clerk, barely out of college, didn't even glance up. His hood was pulled low, earbuds humming some mindless beat. Whatever it is, he muttered, eyes locked on his screen. It's probably fake. A snort came from the back of the shop. A man flipping through used records. Looks like something from his grandma's jewelry box, he joked, loud enough to cut. But the old man didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of offense. He just whispered, I only want to know if it still matters. They laughed again. At him. At the box. At the way he stood. Upright, but frayed around the edges like an old flag no one salutes anymore. But then the door chimed, and in walked a man wearing a U.S. Navy pin on his chest. Clean posture, jaw tight, quiet storm behind his eyes. Welcome to endless stories, where real honor doesn't rust, and some medals don't shine because they've seen things the world forgot. He didn't limp like an old war movie. He didn't walk in looking for thanks. He moved like a man used to slipping into rooms where he wasn't wanted but went anyway. Because someone had to. The place was quiet, fluorescent light flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. The shelves sagged with forgotten tools, dusty drills, cracked guitar necks no one played anymore. The air smelled like sweat, solder, and the kind of loneliness that clings to old electronics. The man's coat was simple, brown, heavy. His boots, worn but clean, barely made a sound. He walked up to the glass counter, unbuttoned the inside flap of his coat, and pulled out the box. It was smaller than a lunch tin, but you could feel its weight, like something more than wood was inside. He opened it, and the room changed. Inside sat a silver star, faded ribbon, edges chipped, still proud, still steady, etched in the back. S.J. Everett, 1972. The kid finally looked up, frowned. Is that real? He asked, squinting at the metal. Looks old as hell. Where'd you even get it? The man didn't blink. It was handed to me. The kid smirked. Not malicious, just empty of understanding. What for? Saving a kitten in basic training? A pause. Then the man lifted his eyes, slow as thunder rolling in. For pulling 2 brothers out of a house fire I didn't cause, he said. The clerk shifted in his chair, tried to laugh it off. Look, we don't deal in, like, personal awards. You might find a collector online or something. Some folks are into that army stuff. The old man didn't look hurt, didn't look proud either. He just looked still. I'm not here to sell it, he said, voice steady. I came to see if anyone remembers what it stood for. The clerk blinked, stared at the metal, then shrugged. I don't know, man. It's just a piece of metal. And in that moment, nothing moved. Not the air, not the lights, not the sound from the street outside. But the weight in the room? It changed everything. The quietest things in a room aren't always hidden. Sometimes they're right in front of you, too heavy to lift, too sacred to touch. The old man pressed the lid of the box shut with both palms, not like closing a container, but like burying something he once bled for. He didn't speak, just turned to leave. The bell above the door hadn't even finished its swing when it rang again. Only this time, it wasn't background noise. This time, someone entered who didn't laugh. The door hadn't clicked shut behind the veteran when a sharp bark of a laugh snapped from the rear. Sharp, showy, trying too hard to be cool. A man leaned on a battered guitar like it owed him something. He wore a cracked leather jacket, faded sunglasses, and the attitude of someone who thought cruelty was charisma. You looking to hawk that old metal? He grinned, jerking his chin at the box. What's next? Selling a Purple Heart to pay your phone bill? Another laugh, thinner, higher, bubbled up from a teen crouched by a stack of tangled game controllers. He didn't even glance up. Bet he snagged it off eBay. Made up the story to sound important. The clerk chuckled nervously, caught between wanting to join in and not knowing how far was too far. Told you, he muttered. Every broke dude's got a war story. The old man didn't flinch, didn't turn, but something in his posture changed, like a bridge tightening before a storm. It wasn't just their words. It was the ease of them, the way disrespect was tossed around like small talk. He'd heard that tone before, in a dive bar overseas when someone called his squad cosplay commandos, at a memorial where a local reporter whispered through the names of the dead, at his son Caleb's funeral, when a teenager 2 pews back chuckled and no one corrected him. But this? Here? In front of this? He almost left. His fingers gripped the wooden box, ready to walk away. He could have gone home, locked it back in that drawer, and told himself the world no longer cared. But walking away, that had always been the easy way. And easy had never meant right. So he stayed, held the box like it held every sacrifice that still whispered his name at night. Then the bell above the door chimed again, and the laughter died. Because the man who walked in didn't wear noise. He wore silence, the kind that made people sit up without knowing why. He didn't survey the room, didn't size anyone up. He didn't have to. Places learned long ago to recognize presence before words. His boots were clean, but broken in. His skin deep brown, his jaw sharp. He wore his strength like something inherited, not performed. A dark navy shirt hugged his frame, tucked with precision. Over his heart, a small golden trident glinting faintly under the flickering light. No badge, no nameplate, just a quiet signal for those who knew. He walked to the counter without a glance at the clerk. Didn't acknowledge the smirks. Didn't need to. Whatever brought him here, it wasn't curiosity. It was instinct. The kind honed in places where silence was broken by explosions, and honor was trampled under laughter. His eyes locked on the box in the old man's hands. For a long breath, that was the only thing in the room. Then slowly, he reached for the metal. Not like someone grabbing a thing, but like a man lifting something sacred. Something that might shatter or scorch if not handled right. He turned it once in his fingers, then read the name on the back, silently. When he looked up, there was no theatrics. He just stood, still, and the whole room stopped breathing. He raised the metal in his hand, slow, precise, and brought it to his brow. A salute. Not for applause, not for the audience. It was for the ghosts, for the fallen, for the names whispered in combat, not carved in granite, for the brothers who bled beside him and the promises made through static-filled radios. This was for them, and only them. The room didn't breathe. The clerk froze mid-motion, a receipt spool dangling from one hand. The man in the leather jacket stopped fidgeting, his smirk caught mid-fade. Even the ceiling light seemed to dim. Or maybe it was just the air shifting, pulling time back by the collar and saying, "Watch." When he lowered the metal, he turned to the old man and gave a single nod. Not sympathy, not apology, but understanding. The kind only forged through fire and silence. Nobody said a word. They didn't have to. The hush was heavy, the kind that fills church halls and battlefield graves. And this time, it belonged to someone who'd earned it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The way he stood, calm and still. The way he held the metal, reverent, not theatrical. It made every earlier laugh feel small. Every dismissive word, every joke, dissolved in the air like smoke after a shot. The clerk fumbled with his receipt roll again, eyes darting everywhere but toward the counter. The leather jacket man crossed his arms, uncrossed them, then pretended to tighten a guitar string. Even that felt like too much. But they weren't the focus anymore. The man in uniform kept his gaze on the box, then on the black elder who'd carried it in. Finally, without a hint of anger or performance, he turned to the clerk and spoke. The first word since the room had gone still. This isn't about value, not the kind you count in a register. He held the metal higher, his voice like low thunder. This is about cost. What it took to earn it. What it saved when it was pinned to that man's chest. He could have stopped. He didn't have to say more, but he did. Not because he was mad, because it mattered. I was there. Different war. Different desert. Same silence after the shots stopped. Same ache when the names are read. He looked back at the old man. Men like him don't ask for gratitude. They carry memory. They remember so you don't have to. The clerk opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, but nothing came out. Because what do you say to a man who wears ghosts under his ribs, who holds a medal like it's folded cloth from a casket, who speaks not for himself, but for the 20 names he'll never forget? The Navy man turned back to the elder, both hands offering the medal. No stiffness, just respect, from hands that had taken life, and still knew how to hold something gently. Then, eyes sweeping across the room just once, calm, sharp, still, he said the one sentence no one there would ever forget. You don't get to laugh at what you were never brave enough to earn. And with that, he stepped back. One final nod to the man who hadn't come for cash or compliments. Just a single, quiet answer to a question the world had forgotten how to hear. The bell above the door rang again. Not loud, not proud, but like even it had learned not to interrupt. What stayed behind wasn't just silence, it was reckoning. And if any of them were lucky, maybe the start of understanding. The door clicked shut, and that sound, the same sound it made for every stranger, felt different now. Softer, smaller, as if the world itself had been told to hush. No one moved. The old man didn't sit, didn't speak. He held the metal in his hand again. But this time it wasn't a question. It was a memory returned, a weight rebalanced. The man with the guitar finally set it down, slow this time, with care, like even strings and wood deserved reverence now. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Silence had already said what needed to be said. And the kid behind the counter? He looked up, really looked. For the first time in years, he saw someone. Not through a screen, not across a counter, but eye to eye, and it made him realize he'd never seen anything at all. Some things don't carry price tags. They carry silence. "Sir," the clerk finally said, voice low, but the word just hung there, unfinished, like even it knew it was too late. He stepped back. No apology. Just a quiet retreat. The old man didn't gloat, didn't nod, didn't say, "That's what I thought." He just closed the box. The metal settled inside like it belonged there. Not behind glass, not up for sale. He tucked it under his arm the way one folds a flag at the end of a long ceremony. Careful, slow, with the weight of what it meant still in his hands. He turned toward the door. Not slowly because he was old, but because he wanted the silence to have room to breathe. To leave behind something no one would scroll past this time. And for once, the world didn't move on. No one in the pawn shop picked up their phone. No one chuckled, or turned away, or asked what the next customer wanted. They watched him, not like a man leaving, but like someone carrying something they'd forgotten how to honor. And it wasn't curiosity. It was something deeper. The ache of being reminded that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, but it always leaves a mark. He stepped outside. No wave, no farewell, just a steady walk into the sunlight. The same walk he'd made his whole life. Quiet, unapplauded, unshaken. And for the first time in the shop's tired, forgettable history, no one dared laugh. He never told that story. Never brought it up at cookouts. Didn't pin the medal to his chest or sit in front rows at parades. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he felt it too much to turn it into display. That silver star lived in a worn box, tucked inside the breast pocket of a coat he barely wore, except when the temperature dropped or the memories got too loud. Most people who knew him figured he was just quiet, maybe lonely, maybe strange, but they never asked, and he never told. Because it wasn't just a medal. It was a night. It was a name. It was the silence after the shooting stopped. He'd been 24, 2 weeks from flying home. Then came the orders. Wrong coordinates. No air support. No second chances. They moved in under a dead moon and a silent radio. They were told the hill was empty. Intel had lied. First shot caught Johnson in the shoulder. Simmons was already bleeding by the time they reached the rocks, calling for his mother in a voice too thin to echo. He could have stayed in cover, could have waited, but something deeper than orders pulled him forward, something that didn't come from rank or training. He couldn't stand hearing one more boy die without someone holding his name. So he ran. Not to be brave, but because someone had to go first. He dragged them both out, one by one, bullets slicing the air like snapping wires, blood soaking through his sleeves, his own hands shaking so badly he barely kept grip. Simmons had held on the longest. Not to life, but to him. "You brought me back," Simmons had whispered, just before his voice slipped away like steam in the cold. He was still holding that hand when sunrise came, still kneeling when the medics arrived, still shaking when someone pinned the medal to his chest 3 weeks later in a room full of strangers. He didn't invite anyone, because the only ones he wanted there weren't. So the medal never saw a shelf. It stayed in the coat, because it wasn't for display. It was for memory. And every year in November, when the weather turned, he'd walk to the same bench in the same park with a black coffee in one hand and those names in the other. Not shouted, not read aloud, just whispered. Once. Same breath, same silence. Every time. He always came to the same bench. Didn't matter if the sky was clear or the ground was frozen. Whether it rained or snowed, he came. Not out of obligation. Not because someone told him to. Because promises written in blood don't dissolve when the world forgets to ask about them. He never spoke the name aloud. Not to neighbors, not to friends. Not even in the years when the ache in his ribs made it hard to breathe. Because that name wasn't just a person. It was a moment frozen in time. A final breath. A kid from Arizona with too many jokes and too much heart. A boy who carved his initials into the grip of his rifle and used to say, "If I make it out, I'm gonna sing country till Nashville gets tired of me." The last thing Caleb ever said was, "Tell my dad I wasn't scared." And he wasn't. He died with his eyes open, not fixed on the sky, but locked on the one who pulled him from the fire. So every year, on the day that letter arrived, the one that began with, "We regret to inform you," and ended with a name typed by hands that never knew him, the man walked to that same park bench, sat in silence, and whispered, "Caleb." No ceremony, no medal on display, just one name. Because sometimes a single name carries the weight of every bullet, every silence, and every breath you still get to take. He noticed the boy before he heard him, a figure drifting near the edge of the field, shoulders hunched beneath a hoodie, backpack hanging low, camera resting on his chest, shoelaces untied. He didn't look like someone who wandered into this kind of stillness, especially not on a cold November morning. The old man figured he'd pass by, maybe snap a photo of the mist curling off the grass and move on. Earbuds in, world on mute. But the boy didn't move on. He stopped, about 10 feet away, and looked, not at the flag resting across the old man's lap, not at the steaming coffee beside him, but at the silence itself, as if he could see something there the rest of the world had missed. The man didn't speak. Neither did the boy. Instead, he stepped forward and took a seat on the far end of the bench. No rush, no awkward shuffle, just quiet presence. His legs swung slightly, camera still around his neck, no photos taken, no words offered. He just sat, like he knew this space wasn't meant to be filled with noise. Minutes passed, then a few more. Still nothing spoken. And then softly, eyes still on the clouds, the boy said, "My brother was supposed to come home last year." The old man didn't reply. Not because he didn't care, but because he knew that voice, knew what it meant when silence cracked open like that. The boy pulled a journal from his bag, not a school notebook, something older, leather-bound, edges worn. He flipped through sketches, pages tucked with notes and photos, until he stopped at a single torn square, a line written in black ink, "Keep doing what matters, even if no one claps." He handed it over. No explanation. The man read it once, then folded it with care and slid it into the inside pocket, the one behind the medal, the one where he usually kept names he never said aloud. "You know his name?" he asked. "Yeah," the boy replied. "I say it every day." They didn't speak after that. Didn't need to. Because sometimes grief just wants company, not answers. Just a place to rest. And for the first time in years, that bench didn't feel like a monument. It felt like a home for memory. Later that day, the boy would glance down and notice the light, how it caught the folds of the flag, the lined skin of the man's hand. He took a photo. He hadn't meant to. He didn't add a caption. Just posted it with a single word. Still. By morning, it had circled further than he ever expected. Not with emojis or empty slogans, but with names. Hundreds of them. Stories of grandfathers never met. Letters that never reached home. Medals found in attic boxes, never understood until now. And for the first time, the town, the same one that had walked past that bench 1,000 times, finally paused. The first to show up wasn't a veteran or a soldier. It was the librarian. She brought a stool, placed it gently beside the bench, and said nothing. She took a seat with a novel in her hands and a tiny flame flickering inside a glass jar. Next came the postman, uniform still pressed, shoes dusty. He left a white envelope on the bench's edge, pencil across the front, for everything. Then it was the man who poured coffee every morning, the youth pastor, the teen who once got detention weekly, but never missed a dance battle. He stood still, hood up, staring like he'd finally recognized what the fabric in front of him really meant. Not a movie scene, not a classroom poster, but history, heavy and human. By early afternoon they had gathered, not because anyone told them to, not because of a headline, but because stillness had finally found an audience. They didn't pose, they didn't speak, they just stayed. And when the mayor came, she didn't bring a speech, just her father's tag, and the silence he left behind. She didn't address the crowd, didn't approach the seat. She walked behind the bench, placed a carved stake into the earth, and whispered, "This matters." The old man didn't nod, didn't reply, but his fingers, once always shaking, found their calm. Because in that moment he knew, he no longer held the weight alone. Some things don't need ceremonies, they just need someone else willing to stay. The following year, the seat remained. So did the cloth. But the man, he was gone. No headlines, no taps, Just a light left on in the hallway, a jacket still hanging by the front door, and a folded paper on the kitchen table. But what he carried, that didn't vanish. Because the boy returned. Same day, same time. This time, the flag was in his hands. Not boxed, not folded tight. Held flat. Full. He laid it across the seat, sat beside it, and waited. No push alerts. No camera crews. Still, they came. The barista brought 2 drinks. One for whoever showed up next. The mayor sat without her sash. Only the tag still around her neck. Even the pawn shop kid came. Didn't say a word, but stayed. When the sun reached its highest point, the boy stood. With both hands, he unfolded the flag again. Corner by corner, deliberate, precise. Each movement mirrored exactly how he'd been shown. Not for show, for meaning. He never spoke. Didn't need to. When he folded the last triangle back to its resting place, he pressed it against his chest, and every hand in the crowd rose, not to record, not to wave, but to honor the promise they had seen kept, not just to a man, not just to a uniform, but to memory. Because a single fold may represent loss, but done right, done fully, 10 folds carry something else. Continuation. If this moment stayed with you, if it reminded you of a name you haven't said in a while, don't let it fade. Don't just scroll. Ask, show up. And if you can't carry the whole story, carry just enough so no one forgets. One fold, one memory, one legacy, passed forward.